Welcome to the Dr. Mudgil podcast. This is episode 134. We are creeping into the middle of June here. School is wrapping up for my kiddos. My daughter's last day is actually, I think it's actually today. Her last official day. I think she's got some finals and things like that. She's in high school, about to be senior, so it's an exciting time for her and my two boys. One is entering high school next year, and the other is entering 7th grade, so they have a little bit longer to go. I think they go into school like next weekish, but they're all wrapping it up. You know, my middle guy is graduating from middle school next Friday, and it's crazy how fast this ride goes by. You know, I talk to my patients all the time. You know, it's amazing. Like, you know, I've been in practice in my New York City office for 15 years, and I see folks who I saw as teenagers who are now married and having their first kid or second kid. And I see their babies as patients. It's such a wild, amazing ride. But it's funny. I always talk to my patients who have little ones and say, when they're that little, the days just are very, very long. You know, the babies get up at the crack of dawn. Frequently they're up many times throughout the night, and you're just like a walking zombie. It's a wild thing. The days are really long, but the weeks and the months fly by until all of a sudden your kids are 16, 14, and 12 like mine. It's just like, wow, where did all that time go? And now it's just even flying by faster and faster. I can't believe the school year is over. But it's going to bring me to the content of this podcast. But before I get to it, it is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful beginning of summer here. Almost the official beginning of summer. Summer actually starts in about a week or so. But it is hot here in New York. The sun is shining, and it's just it's a beautiful time of year. The flowers are blooming, my roses are blooming, my hydrangeas are starting to come in, and I love it. I love summer. I told myself a few years ago, because as the older I get, the more I hate the cold. I told myself I will never complain about the heat. I don't care how hot it gets. You'll never hear a complaint from the doc. You'll only hear me complaining in the winter when it's cold. So with that, this weekend coming upon us, just a few days from now, is Father's Day. And the older I get, so Father's Day is always a few weeks before my birthday. So this time of year is always like a sort of introspective, reflective time for me. And, the older I get, the more important Father's Day is for me than, my birthday. And I think that's probably pretty normal cycle of life for most folks. I'm sure many moms feel the same way about Mother's Day. But I want to talk a little bit about Father's Day. So first things first, I'd like to wish all of the amazing, wonderful dads out there a very, very happy Father's Day. I'm around a lot of dads. Both my boys play hoops. So a lot of the moms are there as well. I'm around a lot of moms too. But I've got to know a lot of dads through the years, and a lot of my friends are dads and family members are dads. So I'm around a lot of dads, and I'm fortunate to be around a lot of great dads, a lot of dads who inspire me, who I admire, who I look up to, who I try to emulate. They make me proud and they inspire me. The interesting thing, and this is something, I've talked about, many of you probably know about me. I actually grew up without a dad. My mom and dad got divorced when I was like less than a year old. And, my dad was a bad guy. I've never met my dad, to be honest with you. But from what I hear, he was not a good guy. And my mom escaped a very, very dreadful situation in a time where, especially in like the Indian community in like the 70s, it was like basically, it was very rare for folks to get divorced. And, my mom saved my brother and I from a bad situation, kind of one of those classic stories where she tucked away and dipped out in like the middle of the night. And we went to her friend's apartment who we crashed with for a while. Again, I don't remember any of this. I was like less than a year old. But the stories I hear, those remind me of how amazing of a woman my mother is, who kind of assumed both roles. But Father's Day has always been kind of an odd, especially on my very first Father's Day, is always kind of like a weird thing for me. And weird in a good way, not weird in a bad way. Just not having grown up with a dad, the closest thing I had to a father figure was my older brother, who was 7 years older than me, who to this day is like salt of the earth, greatest guy one could ever meet. Just like a super saintly, amazing soul. Someone who I always looked up to. I still look up to him. Just an amazing guy. and someone who's like, footsteps. He's a doctor also. He practices ophthalmology in the Philly area, and someone whose footsteps I always followed. He's someone I think the world admires. His kids adore him. His wife adores him. And there's actually nothing not to adore about my brother. An amazing guy. But so he was kind of like, I'd say like the male figure in my life. And, again, someone who I tried to emulate, someone who I learned a tremendous amount from. My granddad also lived with us, but he was kind of more or less, I lived with my granddad, but he was more or less kind of there. My mom was actually kind of more taking care of my granddad than, than it was the other way around. So I was very much like a Gen X latchkey kid. I'd come home from school and basically kind of just be on my own until my mom came home from work. She was a government physician. So she had essentially like, an 8 to 6-ish type situation. But like after school, I'd just kind of be doing my own thing. And, going into fatherhood, like, when my daughter, who was 16 going on 17, when she was, about to be born, this is actually maybe just before I started my practice in New York City. I remember it's a weird thing because like, when you don't like have a dad, it's not something I ever really thought about, to be honest with you. But you start to think about like, wow, like, how do you be a dad? I'm sure moms go through the same thing. Like when you're expecting your first child, like, wow, how do you mom? Like, for me, it's like, how do you dad? And I didn't really have anyone to really emulate. Sure. I saw my close friends who had fathers, kind of see, get glimpses of what that was all about. But, until you really are in it, or I guess, for me, if you have a dad, you probably have a much better understanding of what being a dad's all about. But it was kind of uncharted waters for me. And not that I was nervous about it. I wasn't like scared. I was confident that, I had the tools that are required to be a dad. But it was kind of like walking into the unknown, for lack of a better phrase. And, seeing all the dads that I know now, like everyone, quote unquote, dads in a different way. For instance, like the basketball dads. There's a group of us that have now been together for like many, many years. For my little guy, his team has been together for a while, and there's like the dads, the coachy ref type dads who are always like, who know a lot about sports and are very, into sports and yelling at the refs and coaching from the sidelines and that sort of stuff. They're like the chill dads who are just kind of, just watching the game and, rooting their kids on, rooting all the other kids on as well. They're the angry dads. They're the grumpy dads. There's a whole bunch of different categories of dads, and they're all great dads. They all have sort of different vibe about them, different flavor of dad, but, all the dads are great dads. And the unifying thing, and the thing that I've learned the most, especially, the older and older I get, the unifying thing is love. Like we all just love our kids. All the basketball dads, it's a boys' team, so we all, love our boys. Moms love their boys too. But, we all do things like different ways. We all interact with our kids in different ways. We all have a different dynamic in our families. But the unifying force, for all of us is just the tremendous amount of love we have for our kids. And that's like, and any parent will tell you this, like, there's like no greater love actually than the love you have for your children. It's just like this powerful, powerful, powerful feeling. Nothing surpasses that. I mean, listen, I love my wife to death. And I'm sure my wife, I hope she loves me to death too, but the love we have for our kids, I think, is even like greater than that. It's what it's all about, And it always brings me back to this Maya Angelou quote, and she said, I love this. It's such a brilliant quote. She said, people may forget what you said, people may forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel. And, being a dad, things you think about, listen, we're all human. I'm sure just things I've done and said that weren't like the right thing in the moment. We all make mistakes. But what I hope my kids will remember and know and feel is I hope I always made them feel loved, because that really is what being a great dad, really being a great dad, being a great husband, being a great friend, that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, Father's Day, Mother's Day, it's just all about love. So with that, I hope all you dads out there have a weekend that is just filled with tons of love, If you play golf, a little golf. If you barbecue, you have some barbecue, some pool time, some great hang time with your family, with your kids. And I wish all of you amazing dads out there a very happy Father's Day. Let's get it.